So yesterday I was watching quite a bit of the Overwatch League, almost every single match, and overall I thought it was a really good experience, and probably one of my favorite esports experiences that I've had in quite a while. Very interactive, the chat was pretty fun, even though they just kept spamming loot box, so there was that. And as well, there were quite a few good games. Now, the first few were just kind of blowouts, so I guess that was that. But the Soul game I thought was especially a really interesting one. But today I want to talk to you guys, other than, just playing out Overwatch League, which I'm hopefully going to talk about more in the future. Talk about how you can use these league games to help yourself rank up, and how you can use experiences that you see in your own gameplay. And I am going to say, though, today, before we really get started, that you aren't going to rank up as fast by watching Overwatch League for 10 hours as you would by playing competitive for 10 hours. I think that should be pretty obvious to anyone. It's just not going to happen. Simply putting in time, working hard, improving yourself is going to do more than trying to learn from the best. But I feel like there still is a lot of merit to trying to learn from these players, and a lot of merit from watching these games. And probably my favorite thing is that by watching these games, you can often improve without A, having to put in way too much effort, B, having to put in way too much stress, and C, having a really good time. Because sometimes while you're playing competitive, it can be really toxic, it can be really unfun having terrible team comps. But when you watch this league and you see good team comps every single game in a row, and a lot of the times really good matches, or at least some blowout matches that are still pretty entertaining, that can also be a really good benefit. So there you go with that. There's my overall main just talk about the league. And one thing else that I want to mention about the league is that, and before we really get started about how to rank up with the league, realize that a good benefit of these people also is that it can get you back into the game a lot. If you're a player that has been out of Overwatch for a while, or you just don't really care about competitive that much, watching these competitive games and watching these players put in so much time and become so good and see them pop off doing all this different crap, that can really get you hyped and get you back into the game, turn your Super Saiyan, and it can really just help you get the right mindset, I guess, again, because I know a lot of people have kind of given up over the years, and that might just be the push that you need by watching Overwatch League and watching all these players by itself to rank up. But anyways, today I'm going to talk about how to actually rank up with these games. And I feel like the most important thing to do when trying to rank up, personally, is pick a team that you want to follow. And I honestly don't really think it matters which team you follow. Now, you should probably hopefully follow one of the Korean teams, as they are probably the best teams. I guess we're going to kind of have to see with that and learn from their gameplay. But really, I don't care. Pick any of the teams, as they are all really, really good players, and they all have their different play styles that'll work in ranked differently. After you pick a team, for myself, I just picked the Houston Outlaws because they had cool colors. That's as simple as it is. But now I'm going to watch every single one of their games for at least the next season, just based off that. And you might want to do something like that as well, or just off some other random thing, maybe your favorite player or something like that. But after you pick a team, look at all their matches and see what they're doing within their matches. Now, we didn't have way too much gameplay of the Outlaws yesterday, so I couldn't really use them as an exact example in today's video. But one thing that I'm going to try to do is look at the other team, the other green team that we had yesterday, as an example. They did pretty dang good, and for the most part, I think what made them do so well in a lot of the maps is that I was following their DPS, and they weren't really dying way too much. And a lot of the times, especially the Tracer players in Overwatch League, weren't dying way too much. And one thing that I learned just from following the games and looking at the players and trying to analyze exactly what's happening is that a lot of the times these players would go in, get to about a quarter health, and then always run away every single time. And they wouldn't take those risky plays to get the final hit on the enemies. They'd make sure to stay alive as Tracer. And normally I'd kind of consider myself, what should I do? Should I go in for the kill and trade 1 for 1, or should I escape and maybe go 0 for 0? And that seems to be kind of what a lot of these players are doing. So the next time that I play the game, I'm probably going to do something similar. And that's kind of what you can figure out. You can figure out different teams and their playstyles and see what works for them and maybe what'll work for you. As well, something that I think I should mention is you can learn how different teams like to position. And I'm hopefully going to learn quite a bit from this from the Outlaws. Now, one thing I have to mention is that, yeah, you can't control your teammates' positioning, and a lot of the times people may not coordinate with you way too well, and they may just make really stupid mistakes that don't make any sense, and that's just going to happen in your games, and that's always going to happen no matter how much Overwatch League you watch. However, you can learn a lot of ideas about where you can tell your team to maybe go to, and where you can shot call your team to maybe be while you're there, and maybe where you should be while your team is somewhere. If you always see that, for example, when your team is on the cart and your Tracer, that their Tracer is always pushed around the very right half of Dorado, maybe you should go there, and maybe you should try to figure out how that's working for the people on the esports, and then try to apply that into your own game. I think that the most important thing to learn from these games is mainly where to position, when to position there, and what maps are used in what way. And I think this is something you might want to pay attention to in a lot of your games. Of course, it is nice to see a lot of these plays, and it is nice to know that, you know, there's a lot of good players, and that's probably the most exciting thing to see, just a lot of huge pop-offs. But when you pay attention to maps, try to look at where the players are standing and try to look at where they are compared to other players. See where the supports are, see when the supports get close, when they get far. If you're a tank player, see when the tanks are jumping down, see when the tanks are staying up compared to the rest of the other players, and see how they utilize getting a pick, and if they push up a lot or if they still play really defensively and just hope to slowly but surely grind on the enemy team and get more and more picks. See what your team likes to do and try to emulate something similar to your that with your own gameplay. And as well, oftentimes, especially on defense, look at where they're standing on defense, because that can give you a very good stronghold for defense in the first point, or even later points on, as that's probably one of the most important things to learn on defense. Of course, in esports, offense is a lot stronger than defense, so you could, I guess, try to learn a little bit more from that than the defense. But just being able to hold for 1 extra minute or 2 extra minutes itself could win you a game, so do kind of keep that in mind. So of course, you're watching a game, you're trying to learn where they're positioning, you're trying to learn how your team plays, where they go next to each other, and that's all really nice. But one thing that I feel like a lot of people are going to ask the question on is, what if nobody's playing my character? Or what if somebody plays my character for like 1 second? And that is going to happen. Not all the characters in the game can be good at the same time. That's just kind of how Overwatch is going to work. Now, luckily for all of you, most of the characters were actually chosen relatively quickly in this time of esports, in the Overwatch League. Most of the characters were played, and while some of them, like Mei and Moira, were used mainly just as stall tactics, still, you gotta figure out where they fit in. But even if you don't really see your character way too often, or even if your team doesn't really like to play the certain character that you're playing, there still is quite a bit you can learn. Now, one thing I want to say also, though, is that if you do notice that your team sometimes picks up the character that you're playing, or that, you know, any team on the roster sometimes picks up the character that you're playing, let's say you're like a Lucio main, you see sometimes this team picks up Lucio, I'd probably watch them a lot. I'd probably make them the team that I want to try to follow, because then you won't be frustrated by never seeing your character. But other than that, if still you can never find your character and none of the teams really play them way too often, just look at, again, how people generally position, how the general supports position, and of course it won't be one-to-one, but it will be a little bit more useful. And as well, look at characters that are kind of similar to your characters. Now for supports, I feel like this can be somewhat hard, especially with someone like Lucio, but luckily we have seen some Lucio gameplay, and the only gameplay that we haven't really seen way too much of is Symmetra, which is a little bit jank and really hard to pull off in esports, so mainly just try to look at, I guess, how they're going to play Torb and other characters like that, maybe even Moira to figure her out, but just look at characters that are similar to each other. Could be by role, or it could be by class, or it could just be by their kits being really similar, and try to play them somewhat similarly. I think a good example, I guess, right here could be Hanzo and Widowmaker. While they are 100% not even close to being a direct one-to-one correlation, a lot of the times the positioning can be somewhat close, and where they want to be at what time can be somewhat close. And while I wish that I could tell you, you know, look up the exact parts of these matches that have those exact characters that you want to learn, I feel like you're going to have a lot just better of experience instead of just scourging through all of the VODs to hopefully find your character. Just look at the main classes and see where they usually position, the consistent DPS, see where they're on the map compared to their team, compared to like the flankers, and then put your character in that situation and try to figure it out for yourself. And that's really what you can do in these matches. I know that it's not nearly as good as just saying, hey, if you're a Tracer player, look at all these other Tracer players in esports and try to learn from them. Of course, that is the best situation for you. But even if you're a player that doesn't have something that's, you know, really just represented way too much, you aren't 100% screwed by these matches. And even if you aren't learning way too much about your exact character, you're still learning a lot about the game flow, where your teammates are probably going to be, and as well how a lot of the other classes and how a lot of the other characters in other classes will play. So just gaining general game knowledge from the casters and from the gameplay, that can also be nice, even if you aren't really just helping your exact character. And of course, well, you might just have to go to competitive to help yourself in that sense. But there you go with that. Mainly from all these matches, just try to learn what they're doing and try to emulate it in your own games. Now, you don't have to 100% copy it, and you can change up your gameplay depending on just what you want to do. You know, you can do whatever. But I feel like that's kind of just how the Overwatch League is going to help you. And of course, you will learn a lot of specific situations with specific characters that I could not mention right now because, you know, just the way that Reinhardt's played against McCree's flashbangs in the games was just amazing by itself. But you're gonna get, I guess you're just gonna have to look for those, and those will be just some extra benefits that you might learn during the game that even if you aren't the characters that are, you know, playing against each other, you could still learn how they interact and how you should play around those characters that are interacting with each other. So there you go, that could, I guess, be a benefit as well. Anyways, as always, guys, thank you all for watching. I just wanted to talk about the Overwatch League as it was probably one of my favorite things to see in quite a while, and since the Mercy and Junkrat nerfs haven't really gone through yet, I don't really want to play competitive that much right now. I'm essentially just waiting for them to come through, which might take like 2 or 3 more weeks. So of course I am still going to play, but having the Overwatch League to be something that I can watch while I'm waiting for some of those changes to come out is kind of nice. And I guess that is one final good benefit about this. If you aren't liking the meta way too much, but you still like watching the game, Overwatch League's kind of got your back. Anyways, as always, guys, thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Hope that the Overwatch League just goes uphill from here, as I'm already having a pretty good chance, or a pretty good time with it. And tell me down below who your favorite team is, why they're your favorite team, and if you don't have a favorite team, make it up right now and put it down below, and you can change it in a few days. Just give yourself, I guess, somebody to watch. Anyways, as always, guys, thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a wonderful day.